It is becoming harder and harder for Russians to deny reality. While Putin is making unsubstantiated claims about Russians capturing thousands of kilometers during 2026, reality of the front line and inability of Russians to demonstrate any notable advance is really putting a wrench into the whole equation that they have presented here at the start of this year. Despite the rising number of attacks, Russians are not really speeding up any kind of their offensive campaigns, and arguably the Ukrainians are just getting better and better at removing Russians from their territory. Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Let's look today at the front line and understand where we are at and how bad Russia is doing. And believe me, it is truly terrible. But we start with some positive news because Ukraine was able to exchange additional 186 military prisoners from Russia. This is a part of the Russia's payment for Ukraine allowing Russia to have the military parade. The life of every Ukrainian defender is holy because they are standing for what is right, which is defending their home. This is truly wonderful to see that Ukraine cares so much to get more people back home. But let's jump into the front line. And one of the most important things, we're going to cover kind of large swaths of territory, but the preamble is that Russia is struggling. So if we look about the data of Russian advances in the last week, we see that it was 3 square kilometers. But more importantly, in the last couple of weeks, Russia has been increasing the number of attacks. For example, last week, the number of attacks increased 19% more. And this double-digit increase has been going on for a while now. Despite all of that, the last 5 weeks, you see that overall the territory that Russia captured is pretty pitiful. And this is important because while this is happening, Russian losses are also increasing. One of the major things that was noted in the last couple of days is that over the last 3 days, Russian losses were over 1,400 personnel, and just yesterday, 1,550. That's why, despite what I'm going to say next, please note that Russians are actively attacking and are sustaining major losses here. So what I want to cover is I want to cover the regions around Sumy, north of Kharkiv, and pretty much Kupiansk to Liman. The positions here are pretty locked. Russians are trying to advance, but they're not succeeding in any way possible. This is especially noted around Liman, where Russia is just completely stuck, and Ukrainians are actually conducting some small counteroffensive, but not notable enough to report. So how Russia is doing? Putin is claiming that they will capture Donbas by the end of the year. Reality is they won't. But we already know that. So let's look at if Russia can achieve maybe some realistic objectives. Ukrainian analysts have been outlining what Russia can achieve, which is they can try to approach Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. We talked about Limansk just now, so the northern direction for Russians just isn't working out so far. They are way behind schedule and nothing shows that they will even closely approach it. So most likely the northern direction, we can say Russia in 2026 already sort of failed. They will just not be able to make up for the time. The direction from the east, so-called Sloviansk-Siversk direction, this is where Russians are advancing towards the west, and this is where they are trying to get up the hill and get over the small creek, so to say, like a channel, to get over on the hills and to get to Sloviansk from the eastern side. Russians here are trying to get further, but they have had major issues. Biggest problem for them is Rai Alexandrivka. The problem for Russians is not even Rai Alexandrivka itself. The problem is Rai Alexandrivka is just the first step. This is the mandatory town that they need to capture in order for them to kind of move forward. And at least reach that channel that we were talking about. The channel is located right over here if you just want to see. So Russians are not even approaching sort of the main outlined barrier. So once again, we cannot say that Russia is not succeeding here completely, but from my perspective, they are sort of a behind schedule. So for the north part, I am ready to say that 2026 is completely lost for Russians in any kind of tactical advances, then I will be able to say at the end of June that if Russia will not reach this channel over here, then at that moment I will be ready to claim that 2026 is a complete disaster also on the east. And moving southward, arguably the only place where Russia is having certain success, this is also one of their main focus in the front line at all, is this village of Konstantinivka. The problem of Konstantinivka, I explained you a lot, that this is just the first step. There is another settlement of Alexeyevo-Drushkivka, and then there is Drushkivka itself. So there is a sort of a couple of gates that they need to get through before they can reach the south part of Kramatorsk. And I mean, the southern part, approach from the southern part for Russians doesn't do anything by its own. They need at least one more direction before it becomes really problematic for Ukrainians. So they need that eastern or at least northern direction. But they're, as I said, by the end of June, I'm pretty sure I will be able to say that they are going to be failing there as well. But on the south, Konstantinivka right now, Russia was able to get into the center of the city. They were able to establish themselves in the high-rise buildings, and Ukrainians are having trouble getting Russians out of these high-rise buildings. Despite the fact that the Ukrainians are using aviation to fight the Russians, the reality is, and this is something we're going to repeat all along the front lines, that Ukraine just doesn't have enough infantry to clear out their buildings from the Russians. They're only able to use sort of the drones to delay their advances here. Konstantinivka is... if we want to say what would it take for Russia to completely fail on this direction as well, I would say for that we would need to see Konstantinivka not fully captured before 15th of July. So if 15th of July and we will still see Russia trying to struggle for the settlement of Konstantinivka and not fully capturing it, I would be ready to say that Russia 2026 is they will not execute even the minimum viable program, so to say. One nice part that I want to mention here is that from time to time Ukrainians are poking at Russians around the Chasiv Yar area, and just recently we had some news that Ukrainians counterattacked and actually retook parts of the Markove village, which was pretty nice because it undermines a little bit this whole Chasiv Yar direction. Previously, as you know, Ukrainians attacked from this southwestern area of Chasiv Yar that they still control. By the way, Chasiv Yar, next town after Bakhmut. Yes, that Bakhmut, just literally 10 kilometers, and Russians are still struggling to advance. Then we get to Pokrovsk area, and I mean, here things are not really looking great for Russians. They're hitting the wall. Basically happened exactly what we were expecting, is that while they were able to put all of their efforts, lose a ton of men, and finally capture the Mirnograd-Pokrovsk agglomeration, the actual challenge started behind these cities, because this is where Ukrainians built the new Donbass line, and actually they have been building even more fortifications. Ukrainians have a strong positions in the settlement of Biletsky, where they're counterattacking Russians and preventing their advances. Despite Russians trying to contest Shevchenko, Mirne, Serhiivka, this is where Russians are approaching the defensive lines of Ukrainians, and so far nothing that they have done even closely suggests that they are able to breach or close to breaching even the first line of the defenses. It's really bad for them. So there are some tactical advances, but once again, they are sort of advancing towards the fortifications that will be even worse for them. Moving southward, this is where we get into very, very, very positive news. Now, we have only slight information that is coming out from there, but the news are that Ukrainians are conducting counteroffensive actions. Now, I'm not ready to hype them out to be like something massive, especially there are certain news that Russians are trying to get back to the positions that were lost. But it was stated that Ukrainians here conducted a long and grueling campaign to retake part of Tolstoy, retake Zelenigay, Alexandrograd, and also Sosnivka and Novoselivka. So Ukrainians were able sort of make a push alongside this part of the front line and retake, by the current measures, a notable part of the front line. And again, like, I'm not underscoring it too much, because while it is nice to see movements from Ukrainian side as well and see that, yes, Russia is not able to control all parts of the front line, which is exactly what we expected, right? If 2025, Russia was quote unquote strong, so they were able to both attack on their main direction of attack, but also pressure Ukraine on other directions on the front line. Well, now 2026, we see Russia is losing that balance. Yes, they are still marginally advancing in some of their main directions that we covered around Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, but other secondary directions for them are really becoming problematic. And already now we are seeing Ukrainians conducting successful operations to liberate their territory. And then moving a little bit southwards towards the Hulaypole direction. So Hulaypole is interesting. This was where Russia sort of created this local breakthrough. There was an issue with Ukrainian command. The brigades that are stationed here are a little bit less equipped. And actually, this is the reason why Russia is still having like very, 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 very marginal success. Reality, what is reported from this whole area is that Ukrainians are not really allowing Russians to advance in any kind of significant way, and that's true, they're barely moving. The problem is there's very, very few infantry units for Ukrainians that are available here, and while the drones can destroy the buildings, can maybe even fly into the basements, there is just not enough Ukrainian infantry specifically in this area to clear out those basements fully and sort of capture, or at least clear the Russians out. So the actual gray zone in this area should be a bit larger rather than red one. And it's only because Ukraine here is most notably suffering from the lack of manpower. And finally, you heard it, you know it, it is Ukrainian counter-offensive actions around the south. I already mentioned that Ukrainians are conducting counteroffensive actions, and the same goes here. Ukrainians were able to move southwards in this area. They were able to liberate one small settlement. They were able to contest Primorske. They were able to liberate more parts of Stepnohirsk, and there's also reports that already Ukrainians are showing themselves to be in Plavny, and they're continuing their operations. Russians here are really struggling. And they're struggling a lot, actually. And there is a lot more to say. Because what Ukraine right now is conducting is a massive logistical death of this whole area. Ukrainian mid-range drones are increasing in quantity and lethality. Right now, this whole region, this whole sort of a land corridor, is now being under attack. All of the main roads are being attacked. All of the transport is being attacked. And right now, Russians here are pretty much already stating, well, this is really bad. If this is going to continue, then this whole southern part of frontline is going to actually run out of logistics. And Russians here are stating that this opens possibilities for Ukrainians to do some very nasty things. Because some of the analysts, and this is Russians that were analyzing, so I'm not giving away any secrets here, they have been stating that a lot of Ukrainian forces have been focusing on beefing up the assault battalions and the assault brigades. Those are the brigades that get engaged to liberate territory. Those are the units that would go and, for example, fight for Kursk. Russians are looking at the situation here. the lack of logistics, the fact that Russians are suffering both in Crimea, where already right now there is pretty much full lockdown on fuel distribution, and Russians don't even have enough fuel for the mobile anti-drone units to drive. And right now, this is all expanding. So if Russia loses logistics here fully, if there is no supply of actual just gasoline for the vehicles, then suddenly all of these formations that are located in this whole southern regions, with Ukrainians concentrating the forces, could create a window of opportunity for Ukrainians to strike. I'm not going to go in details because that's like, speculation, false hope. But the fact of the matter is, Ukrainians, despite the lack of units and infantry in regular units on the front line, and that's a pretty fair criticism to make, and it's being discussed within Ukrainian military, there is now substantial reserves of Ukrainian forces in assault units that are potentially ready to go if Russia is going to get softened up a little bit more. That's the current situation on the front line. Ukraine is in a very good position. There are options. We're not talking about Ukraine just being attacked and not doing anything, as you just heard. There's speculation, but I'm pretty sure we're going to see Ukraine doing something. Please be grateful to Ukrainian armed forces and participate in the fundraiser for the 93rd Brigade's Black Raven Battalion Drone Command. Continue supporting Ukraine, trust in Ukrainian armed forces. I love you. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.
Hi friends, 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade sincerely thanks the communities Ukraine Matters and Ziggy-Spor for providing 100 FPV drones for our unit. Honestly, that's enough FPVs to make Russian vehicles identify as submarines. We are deeply grateful for your support and for the fact that people from all around the world continue to stand with Ukraine. All here from the front line, we feel it every single day. And at this point, every donor is basically becoming a little bit of an FPV pilot too. You donate, we fly. We especially want to thank Ukraine Matters and Ziggy-Spor for your constant support, previous deliveries of drones, equipment, Starlink terminal, and everything that keeps our crews operating day and night. And honestly, the speed of this delivery surprises even us. FPV drones are fast, but somehow your support reaches us even faster. Thank you for your trust, your consistency, and your belief in Ukraine. Together, we are stronger. Together, we will win. Glory to Ukraine! Героям слава! То мої дрони. Hello friends!